Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you the opportunity to enjoy a seat at the table while smart and interesting conversations happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Lisa Givan, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at Indiana Tech. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I had to shorten your title, but in truth, your actual title is the Vice President of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Belonging, and the Chief Diversity Officer.
Correct.
And at the end of 2020, you were appointed to the President's Cabinet because they wanted to reflect the growing strategic importance of both diversity and equity initiatives.
Right.
But actually also when you first came in June of 2018, you actually were charged with setting up the division or the Department of Diversity and Inclusion.
Yes.
So you are the first Diversity and Inclusion Officer.
Yes.
Now, so and the president of Indiana Tech said that the reason that they wanted to elevate you to this president's cabinet level was because they really wanted to instill in you the ability to be responsible for fully integrating diversity initiatives across the university and communities, and that you are to have open participation in forums. You're supposed to get different ideas. You're supposed to get people to listen to each other and that feel marginalized, and you've got a big job.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
And so just to put it in perspective, because the main campus is in Fort Wayne, but there are 19, I guess, satellite campuses,
Right.
and so you're not only in charge now of just Fort Wayne, but
Right.
the overall
Right.
university. So when you first came in June of 2018, you came from Kent State University, which is sort of interesting in its own right because of its historical nature and student protests and being able to speak out and certainly were able to protest against something that was very unpopular, which was the Vietnam War. But you actually also came to this involvement and engagement in higher education in the field of diversity because of a mid-career change.
I did.
So tell me about that.
So I've been doing diversity and inclusion work for over 30 years. Yes, over 30 years. I've been in this field since graduating from college. But it was on the corporate America side. I went into management and then soon found myself into training and development, which was through the HR realm. And really this need back then, it was called multiculturalism, and really finding shared voices and helping companies create the synergy to advance the work. After I did that, probably about 12 years, I had been hearing, well, we found a disconnect, honestly. There was this disconnect between what college students were graduating with, the skills, and companies were spending high dollars, right? Sending students back to training to basically play well with others. Because at that time, we were recruiting high academic achieving, students, and realizing that they had spent a lot of time fixed in a book and not necessarily knowing how to interact. So they were coming to us needing to go through advanced training. And
advanced training specifically in the areas of understanding different points of view.
And critical thinking.
And reasoning. And
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So not necessarily what we were terming diversity or multicultural back then, but just learning how to interact other than being by themselves and reading books and writing papers.
Right.
So what that ended up with was me talking to some people in higher education, like, where are we missing the steps? How can we collaborate and come together to have this part infused within the college experience so companies aren't hiring people, taking them off of what they're supposed to be hired to do and putting them through training. And I just really found a passion with people that I was working with in higher ed, and I was like, this could be something that I could help or assist with and develop. And so I moved. My first job into higher ed was a position in outreach and pipeline initiatives. I had children at that time who were kind of in the middle school.
What is the pipeline initiatives?
Middle school to high school, you know, programming and stuff to get them ready for college or have a college experience. So taking them on campuses, trips, and
getting them excited.
Immersed, right, about higher ed.
Okay.
So did that, and it's just really taken off from there in this area. You know, from there went to working with my management team, like vice presidents and associate vice presidents, directors for strategic planning and creating initiatives. My passion is training, so it's always come naturally to me, and went to training as I progressed through higher ed, and here I am now.
Here you are.
With a long title at Indiana Tech.
Well, I think they're packing a lot of expectations in that for you.
Yes.
So, but when you you talked about it, and I think this is really true in higher education, because when professors or individuals who are more involved, like in the classroom or training, as they get higher and higher, but it's the same with any corporate, you know, the further you get away, in a sense, from where you started. So you talked about that as you become senior and administrator, you sort of lose touch with students. But you talk about that you keep this high touch. What does that mean?
So, especially at Tech, I'll use Tech as an example because it's the recent example.
Okay.
I came in to build this program. So in my education and my master's degree and everything, I'm really a person who believes in the theory of total student development, right? It's a holistic approach
so
to
mind, body,
right.
Yeah.
So I met students. Unfortunately, within my first 90 days, we had lost 2 students to an accident homecoming weekend, and that's how I met the majority of the students, was really consoling them and assisting them through this time period of losing their peer, right? So I really developed a relationship with students, and I was challenging them, you know, and supporting them as they were dealing with this and building a department. And at that point, I always tell people, you don't know what you don't know, right? I know how to implement programs. I know how to develop programs, but every culture is different, right? I did not know Indiana Tech, and they weren't. You know, part of the reason for the inaugural role is because they needed something done and didn't necessarily know what exactly it looked like and came to get someone. So I met students. Students were really the catalyst in helping me develop and figure out and hear the voices of the marginalized people, as well as the faculty group that had worked to create it. So for me, students are always going to be central. I am never, as I get elevated, I never want to get so high as that students don't feel as if I have an open door, or if students are here for a holiday and can't go home, that they can't get a meal at Miss Lisa's house. So for me, that's where you want to know, because students are changing, right? I feel like I was an advocate, you know, or activist to some point in college. I started at an HBCU and then transferred to a predominantly white institution. But
HBCU is
historically black college and university. I started at Howard University in DC, and then I transferred. My father died right before my junior year, and I transferred back home to complete my degree.
And you're from Ohio, right?
I am. Northeast Ohio to Northeast Indiana.
So it was a big thing that you also moved here because you left your family.
Yes, I did. I came here solo, and but really intentionally wanting to do what, you know, I was an empty nester. My girls were gone and grown and educated, and so I left to really do what Lisa's always wanted to do. I had this opportunity through a divorce and my kids growing up to actually go back to what my blueprint was, and that's what I'm doing now, right? So I'm just at that point where I'm doing what I believe I was called to do, and it just so happens that it's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I don't plan on going anywhere, so I guess, you know, you guys are stuck with me, but it's really a good place to be. It's really a good time to be here. Even with everything that's going on, I really believe that there was a purpose in my steps coming this way, and yeah.
So so I actually found an interview that you did pretty early on to your coming here. Where you sort of took a look at what your plans were.
Okay.
Okay, and so now you're almost finishing. It'll be 3 years, the end of
Yes.
this academic year.
Yes.
So I want to take a look at and
Okay,
talk
let's
to you about.
see if we're doing what I said I was going to
What you said was at the time that you were going to focus on 5 areas.
Okay.
So the climate of the overall college, and recruitment and retention, both of the students, faculty, education and training, community building, and communications.
Okay.
So partly what you said was you needed to figure out what the Office of Diversity and Inclusivity would look like. So 3 years later, what does it look like?
You know, I think 3 years later, it's grown, and we've made progress in all of those areas. I mean, I'm happy to say that our retention rates for our students of color, specifically our African American students, has increased. We have really worked on the climate and had focus groups and everything to see what the needs are, because the needs at the Fort Wayne campus may not be the same diversity
so
needs.
let's so I want to stop a second when you talk about your the diversity, the Black and African American students, because that's actually the largest percentage of your Indiana Tech's undergraduate students. Is 36.7% are Black and African American, 35.9 are white. So it's really, but you really have sort of a balance of, you know, and then you have 18.3 other that are different. So, but also, I wanted to stop when you talk about, because you were going to say that on the different campuses there are different needs, because one of the things that I think when you look at how do you define diversity, right? And most people think it's because race, it could be ethnicity, it could be sexual, identity, but there's also geographic, and also there is the sense of not just geographic, like the urban versus rural, but also geographic where it's taking students and taking them abroad to experience other cultures and whatnot. So, so when you really looked at diversity, it wasn't just only about race or ethnicity or religion. You also were looking at these issues because, like you said, because I was looking at this and I was thinking, there is no way that the issues in diversity on the Fort Wayne campus or Northern Indiana are the same as the ones you have in your Southern Indiana or in Kentucky.
Right.
So talk about that. Like, how does that, when you're looking at how do you define diversity?
So I think for me that I use simple. It's the presence of difference. Okay. Because depending on where you are going, difference varies, right? Okay. So the numbers you quoted, I believe those numbers are of all of our campuses combined, right?
Yeah. So and how many students is it in total?
Right under 9,000.
Yeah, because you have 2,136 that are enrolled on the Fort Wayne campus, but about 1,500 are undergrads.
Right.
But the interesting there that you also have to look at there is the diversity of your student body in terms of gender, because 65% are male and 35% are female. But
the women are doing some great
stuff. You're doing very well with your faculty, because your faculty, although the majority of your faculty is white, but you're really on par between your male and female professors, which is surprising at a university that is a pre-professional that really has a lot of STEM. So I thought that also you have to look at, right, in diversity.
Right, you do.
Too. Yeah.
You do.
So you had a lot of issues.
Opportunities.
Okay. All right.
Opportunities. Areas of opportunity, which I think is good, right? Because it keeps all of us accountable. It keeps all of us on our toes, and it keeps us constantly reframing what diversity means. Because I feel as if when people are on this diversity journey, they have this end goal, but in essence, they feel like they've arrived, right? When they hit it. You're never going to arrive. The world is constantly changing. And so the presence of difference, hopefully, is always going to change. And it maybe as soon as you get the globally diverse population that you're aiming for, then there's something else that you're needing, right? So you're going for women, or so I believe the goal of us with the title of institutionalizing diversity is to have ownership everywhere. Just like at Indiana Tech, we look at retention falls up under one area on the strategic plan, but retention is everyone's job, right?
But what I also did, I read that you said that there's an issue, and I was surprised, of retention that for students. And now 53% of your undergrads are first generation. So you do have that issue. So when I looked at that, I thought that the time when the students would really drop out with being first time is after their freshman year. But you said that there's really this time between their sophomore and junior year. And I was really surprised why. Is that why at that point?
I don't necessarily know that we know the why. That's what, I mean, if we knew the why, it would be a quick fix, right?
Is it like then they have to declare their major? Is it?
I don't know that it's that they need to declare their major. I believe that sometimes as parents and family units, especially of marginalized populations, and first generation is a marginalized population, we push our students to go to college. We push them, this is something you need. So they do it the first year, and even when they come home, they may be struggling, they may feel like this may not be the space for me, and we possibly push them to go back, like give it another chance, try it. So if they're not feeling that sense of belonging. So Indiana Tech, diversity is not necessarily our problem, right? It's an area of opportunity for all schools, but we boast really good numbers when it comes to diversity. If you're looking at ethnicity, even when it comes to gender, where our area of opportunity is that sense of belonging or that inclusion.
So it's because they also find that for the students who are first generation, it's not necessarily what they experience on campus. It's like if they're having a problem and they call home and they're trying to extend, and their parents can't help them, and they don't know, and they they don't know where to send them or to to help navigate that.
We just talked about this yesterday in a conversation I had with a group. Yes, that is.
So then you have to extend your understanding, and now you actually have on the Fort Wayne campus the representative from 26 different countries. In your student body. So so you have a lot of diversity in the in the range. So that's also you have to take into account, because you have lots of different needs and issues, and you have the majority of which 42% live on campus. Which is very interesting, because you would think in terms of being in an urban environment that it would be like more of a commuter type of school. So that also gives you an opportunity to build more effective programming.
Because when you're living with people, it's different, right? I always tell people, I can't invite someone over to my house and just take for granted that they're going to eat what I eat and they're going to act. So I have to be intentional with making sure that I have different options. Our international admissions and international student support services do an amazing job with acclimating, that the globally diverse students come early. They help with shopping and banking and everything else. So we really are intentional about immersing them into this community. And we do the same. We try to do the same with our other students of color through bridge programs and just really having a connection. So that's why when you talk about a title, diversity is everyone's job. It's not just a job of me, the person with the long title, but it has to be infused into all of us have touch points with our students, whether it's coming from the billing office and accounts receivable, whether it's our coaches, our career center, our student services departments, academics, totally. So when you shift that and pivot the mindset of thinking that this is everyone's job, is to create this sense of belonging so that our students stay and they persist and they graduate. And that does take a shift, because usually people work in silos and think this is my part of the pie.
Especially
let me do that
in an academic institution.
We all think
because they think of their
perfect,
department, they think of their
exactly. And we have really, I think, with the elevation of my role, it is really pivoted to say we have to think different. Like this is an opportunity for us. If you want to do better, you have to try something new, right? And I think Dr. Einoff has been really intentional and vocal with his plans to not only implement but sustain things. So no matter who comes and goes from the university, that our students are still there. I remember in my interview process, he had created an acronym called DIPIS, D-I-P-I-S, and it stood for Does It Positively Impact Students? And that is the framework I based my whole interview off of it, and I have it on a note in front of my computer, because everything I do, I want to do in a spirit of excellence, to know that it positively impacts students. And that's a shift, right? Because go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, higher ed, I think a lot of times we have a corporate mindset. And we probably need to have some sort of a corporate mindset even in higher ed, because higher ed is a big business, right? If you look at all the statements that have been made the past year, we're in the business of educating students.
Right.
Now, how we do that, and you can tell, like, there's schools with drop-down movie screens and rock climbing walls. Why do they do that? Because it's the co-curricular part of the student experience.
Right.
So when you put the total package together, you get your return on investment because they have a good experience, and then they become alumni who give back and things like that. So I really think that that's where we're going. And I believe we're positioned to succeed in that.
So so when you talk about the teaching and the overall campus and what you put forth, so Elliot Eisner, who was a professor in the School of Education at Stanford, Graduate School of Education, he said that any learning environment, there are 3 types of curricula. So the explicit curriculum, which is what the institution says it teaches.
They're going to do, right.
The implicit curriculum, which is the learnings that students take away from the institution without having been taught. So that's sort of the environment you create, what you stress as being important. Maybe it's, the student handbook, that you create. And then there's the null curriculum, which are those things that the institution does not teach. And so the idea that then if they don't teach it, then it becomes perceived that it's they don't consider it a topic that's important.
Value, right.
So what I wanted to push back a little bit on, because when you think about diversity, right? So when the obviously you had a program for Martin Luther King Day, and that's a whole day-long program. But and then also last summer, when everything, the protests for Black Lives Matter and everything was happening, a lot of the universities were very quick to put out anti-racist statements. They were very, indicative of starting programs and things like that. But what I'm curious about is, where was the statement when there were anti-Semitic stickers put on all over Purdue Fort Wayne campus? Does Indiana Tech have a program? Yes, April 8th was Holocaust Remembrance Day. Does Indiana Tech put on a whole program about understanding anti-Semitism? Because that's one of the fastest growing experiences. Do you do anything, Ramadan is coming up. So it's April 12th to May 12th. So do you do a program of educating the student? Because I think if you're because I feel like if you just single out, like you're doing in Martin Luther King Day, then you're saying that that's the type of diversity, or what we're going to focus on this aspect of racism, as opposed to, or really, if you're going to do diversity, I just feel like then I don't think that you can pick and choose, because I think you need to do.
And I'll go with you on that. What I want to caution you is that it's not necessarily that we're doing diversity. We have a large base, and in the past year, we have really listened to our students and our faculty and staff in our campus community.
Okay.
So when one area is hurting or needs assistance more, it's not that we don't listen to the other areas, but we do have an obligation to assist that area. We are also a growing department, and although considered diversity practitioners, we don't have expertise in every area. So with some of our Jewish program, we've worked with an alumni who's really, holding us accountable and really helping us. He's assisting us with some work, and we're doing that intentionally.
Right, but
However,
why wouldn't you reach out to the Jewish community here, or why wouldn't you reach out to the Burmese community? Or
so that's the thing. We have reached out. We have had interfaith dialogues and everything. So I want to caution that just because stuff doesn't necessarily make the news,
I wasn't doing this. This wasn't based on the news. This was looking at. I was looking at your programs, and so you say you do. And all to me, I just was like, because my concern is with this idea of this implicit curriculum. And so my concern is that if your student body doesn't necessarily reflect, like maybe you don't have, in Fort Wayne there is not a large Jewish population, but maybe you don't have a large Asian student population. So, but that doesn't mean that your students should not be made aware of and educated with the whole anti-Asian
the hate that's going on right now.
Because hate is hate.
Yes, it is.
And racism is racism.
It is.
And anti-Semitism is racism. And so I just feel like if you're going to really own this and put it out, push it, you can't just define it as how you want to define race or focus on,
And I don't think we have defined.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm just having a philosophical.
Right. I'm saying that there are areas of opportunity, but there are also things that we have done that may not, that are smaller, and we have talked to students, we reach out to students, we've done programming for students that may not make our website. So unless you're talking to students that are having this, and a lot of stuff is going on so quickly that sometimes we are a little bit behind, but we have reached out to students, we've reached out to staff and faculty, we've had conversations, we've been there to assist with supporting them and have conversations, but everything has not necessarily been a huge program at this time, right? There's just not enough. We don't have the capacity to do it. We sometimes don't have the knowledge base with everything because we're kind of growing and learning at the same time. And we're transparent with that. We're authentic. We don't act like we know everything about everyone. What we do say is that we are on this journey together to do better. And so we listen to the voices that are speaking to us, and we also try to be that voice for the ones who are on mute.
And I'm also, I'm trying to also, because you are involved on a national level in higher education, specifically in this area of diversity and inclusion. So I'm also trying to also have a little bit of a philosophical conversation because of the fact that there is no doubt that anti-Muslim and anti-Semitism has increased over 5 years on college campuses for lots of reasons. And so to me, there's also this sense of that looking at what, overall, why are these sentiments happening on college campuses? I'm talking about not just, this is in Indiana, I'm talking about that way. And then also, I was reading that that the majority of students, they don't know where to go if they've experienced, first of all, I don't think that they can necessarily define racism, because there was a study that was done that this was done by the American Jewish Committee, and they asked 18 to 29-year-olds, because they are the recent grads of college. So they asked them if these statements would be considered anti-Semitic, and that's how they posed it to them. U.S. government only supports Israel because of Jewish money. 32% that said that is not anti-Semitic. American Jews are more loyal to Israel than America. 39% said that was not anti-Semitic. Israel has no right to exist. 26% said it was not anti-Semitic. So I think also it's not even an issue. It's getting them also to understand what is racism and anti-Semitism. And then they said that a large majority, they don't know where to go if they've either experienced it, like they don't report it. A lot of this goes, college campuses across goes unreported. So I don't only think it's so I'm talking about, when you talk about your training programs and everything, I think that we've got to go even deeper in really getting them to understand.
I agree.
And then also, so I'm just curious what your thoughts.
I agree. I think there's areas of opportunity across higher education, period. I also think there's areas of opportunity across humanity, period, right? Like not everyone possesses a college degree or is on track to get one. So which is why organizations are coming toward training and development. And training and development is one, it's the awareness piece. There needs to be skills and tool sets and to keep people accountable and to keep them on this journey. What I do believe, though, is that as a nation, for whatever reason, there's been several wake-up calls lately, and I do believe that there are more people wanting to explore and share their voices. There are more marginalized communities coming off of mute and saying, this is what's going on, and holding, I mean, if the word for 2020 was anything, I believe it was accountability, right? So I think there's an opportunity for all of us to figure out what we don't know and then advance from there together. But we have to have voices at the table. And sometimes in the pockets that we work in and in the silos we work in, there's always going to be something that's not at the table. So you're either going to be intentional with trying to find that voice, and in the meantime, someone needs to amplify or be that voice. And sometimes there's a time to have the mic, and sometimes you need to know when to pass it, like, you can't speak to this. What I do believe we are doing, though, is really intentionally coming together, even across the national organization that I belong to. Different schools experience different things at different times, right? There are some things that we will discuss in meetings that I'm not even thinking that Indiana Tech would ever experience something like that. It doesn't mean it's less important, right? Because some child somewhere on a college campus is experiencing it, and so it means something to us. But we have to know what we're doing and what our frame of reference is then, knowing that it can pivot and shift, and we have to do our best work. So I believe that we are doing that. I believe with the capacity that we have, that we are working in our passion and really trying to figure some things out. And yeah.
So one of the things that, when you look at it both from Indiana Tech and you look at it from a national level on college campuses. So when a student comes on campus, right? So you're going to talk to them about what the policies are of the university for drinking. You're going to make sure that they really understand that in a healthy sexual relationship, what is consent, right? You're going to make sure that they understand your code of ethics as a student. So do you think then, I was like, as part of this freshman, like a course or something that they would take, that I was sort of thinking of as the isms, so it becomes part of, like, across the board, like every, unless you can't, yes, you can test out of it, but like every freshman takes freshman comp, right? So, so this would be part of, like, a course. Every student takes a course that's just, because even if you don't have experience that on your campus, the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to create global citizens, which you are, then they also have to be aware that what happens in Fort Wayne or in one of your smaller campuses doesn't mean that just because it's not there doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And you also have to be able to relate to the bigger world.
Right. So, and I think part of the reason, if I back up, is why I said I came into higher ed, right? Because there was this opportunity for that. We do have a course called Understanding Diversity at Indiana Tech that is a required course for some of our majors and not for all. There has been some conversations and people stepping up and saying, could this course possibly be a requirement for all majors? I don't have that say so. We are entertaining conversations, but that's part of, I believe, the elevation with the role, right? Is that we have these conversations sitting around the table and to see the benefits, so we hear all of the voices, right? So right now we're doing some things, through a restructuring, and that is, I can share it. It has been up for discussion, but things like that don't happen right away.
No, but do you also think that partly why the president, and I would say some of the, well, at least at this table, the word that I hear a lot is intentional. So do you think that the president was very intentional of wanting to create this office of diversity and inclusion? Because I have a feeling that there are lots of conversations around a table, but where's the action? Where's the follow through? Where's the follow up? Where's the implementation? And I think that that's partly, I think, what you're charged with is not only, like I said, going back to the questions of what you learned, you were going to do. I mean, that was one of the things that you really wanted to understand, was this whole idea that sort of you described it as a cultural navigator. Like, and you wanted to really understand, so that then you could create the proper programs. And so you did. I think last summer, most of the faculty went on a training
Our faculty did go through
Right.
trainings, weekly trainings last week, very aggressive and intensive.
And then you are participating in the United Front,
We are
which is the
participating.
initiative that the city and the
Yes.
United Coalition. And so, but is that just the leadership of your department, or is that the whole leadership of the university taking United Front?
The leadership of the university is
Okay.
committed to United Front, as well as we have students and we have faculty
Right.
members that are going through it as well.
And do you think that there may be an opportunity to take, because that's really designed for employers and their employees, and it's really on a professional level, but do you think there's an opportunity to take what you've learned at the United Front and create that course that, that you think students would take?
I think there's an opportunity, but I do want to offer a little pushback, because I don't think it's necessarily just for corporations. I believe that United Front is shared humanity, period. I don't
No, I
think
just meant
it's-
who's going through the program
Right.
this first
Yes.
round.
So
right.
we have, I believe, all the universities in Fort Wayne are involved, as well as maybe some people, some schools in other places. But it puts us on this platform of, at basis, we're humans, right? So where do we connect the dots? Where do we have our aha moments? Where do we have the if we're doing self-awareness, because if we're not familiar with ourselves, we can't affect change, right? So where do we have those moments that it's like, ouch, they're talking to me now, where you think that the person's talking to you? And then where do we have those critical thinking moments that get you to act, right?
Okay.
So it's like the ahas, the ouches, and the ones that are like, okay, now it's time to do something, right? Now we're going to take the Band-Aid. So I really believe United Front is creating this foundation, this for all of us to move forward together.
Right.
So there will be actions. I know we have taken things. I've led sessions for the diversity and inclusion leads that have had actionable items on what you can do if this happens, how you can interrupt if you're a witness, if you're a victim, or if you're a perpetrator, right? You have to grant grace in all three situations. So when you're doing the learning and trying to move forward, then I really do believe there's an area of growth. I think the thing is, people nowadays are really taking accountability and being very aggressive in trying to hold people to the words that they're doing, and really need to say, let's work together with this, and let's not be so divisive or so combative, but let's do this together.
Right.
So if I don't know, I never want someone to miss a message because of the messenger, right? And there's some things where I feel comfortable doing, and there are other things where I can do the basics, but I know people. I have a network of people who can come in and advance it. And I also know people with lived experiences, right? Because lived experiences, and we've seen that the past year, are powerful. Right? When you're living through it and then you come off of mute, it's very much in your face because it's been building up.
Right.
So I believe there's an opportunity for all of us to get it together, so to speak, and to do this diversity thing right.
So I have a two-part question for you for
Awesome.
that. So in United Front, you mentioned that you really did some due diligence and really researched to see if you felt that this was a credible and really valuable program. So putting it through your lens of expertise, I'm curious what you feel it had, or what it does that merits that kind of, that you really felt that this would be a really worthwhile program. And then two, I'm really curious to know, as someone who's been in this field and really on a very high level and in the trenches of really, for our next generation, what, now I know it's still, so you've been participating through since September, so you're probably like halfway through the year, I guess. What are some of the things that has surprised you, either personally or professionally, or those aha moments for you, being someone who is so enmeshed in this field?
So I think first with United Front, in regards to United Front, I will vet anything that my name or our name is associated with to make sure that it aligns and we can map it to our beliefs. The positives for me with United Front and the no-brainers was, I'm a relationship builder. I don't do diversity. I don't do this work in a divisive, hold you accountable in your face. My intention is to build relationships with people so that when we need to have hard conversations, I trust you enough to say, okay, Sarah, we've had this conversation. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I want to see your point.
Right.
So we can connect the dots. And then where the outliers are, we respect them to be outliers enough, but we can still go on this journey, right? So I can't change everything that Lisa Diane Givan is to get along with you, right? I'm not going to do it. And I shouldn't be expected to do it. But there are some things that are areas of opportunity for me. United Front, to me, under their concept of shared humanity, tries to connect the dots and gets us to a good place to where we can do this work correctly.
Okay.
Right? So if we build this and we can have conversations and we can understand, right? We can lean into the understanding,
right,
then it's okay for us to disagree with some things and say, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understand your perspective. I haven't necessarily walked in your shoes, but I can appreciate your journey.
Right.
And I know that even though this person on this shoulder is telling me you're doing this right, this person is holding me accountable and saying you have some work to do. I believe in that. So for me, after some research, it was like, yes, this is a program that could benefit not only my university and my colleagues and my students, but also the people in the city that are doing this. And it gives us a great opportunity to go forward together in the best light for Fort Wayne. In regards to the second part of the question, what was it again?
About what surprised you, like your...
I think what surprised me in the past year has been the fact that things were so shocking for people that as everything was going on, there was this shock and awe of, I didn't know. And I don't necessarily attribute that to good or bad, but it's just, we were all playing well together and all kind of operating, I think, in this quasi-respect and getting along. And then dissension came and voices were amplified. And it takes a strong person if someone is yelling at them not to yell back, right? So when voices get elevated, the other side is going to elevate as much. And I think that was the thing, is like, if you're yelling at them, would you not think that they're going to yell at you?
Right.
Like, no one's real. Everything is highly charged and emotional right now because everyone on all sides is living this.
Okay.
So for me, that was the shock of, we didn't see this coming. Like, we really, I don't necessarily know how we didn't see this coming, but it came, and we're trying to,
Right. But do you think also, so one, because it's about having conversations, and people who have told me, I'm not doing the United Front program, but who are in it, they said that they're very, even in these little groups that you have, that they're very afraid to, like, people are afraid to say the wrong thing. I mean, and I find, like, partly why I have this table in this safe space is because I'm going to ask these questions, and feel that, actually I always used to say, well, we could agree to disagree, but they've actually pointed out that should not be the result, because that just means that we're both just
we're both sitting on, and we're owning our truths and not really bending and listening to someone else's truth, right?
So that, I think, is the one thing that people are so afraid of, these conversations. And then, so I'm wondering, because you also do a week called Cause and Effect Week that we do a few. So of them, that's where people get to share their stories, and you. So that would be, an example of people having conversations, correct? Or listening.
Right.
So, and you pretty much pulled that from the experiences of your faculty, staff, and students on the campus. But do you also bring in other people to help tell their stories that maybe, like we said, like that maybe not be happening on your campus, but for them to get this global...
We have not. This was our first year of Cause and Effect.
And were people really truthful? I mean, did you feel like they were really...
I do. I know that we had a town hall. Me and my president had a town hall with our Black students because as part of the Cause and Effect Week, the first one we had, and our students were very transparent and very authentic, and they held us accountable. I mean, they really, were truthful in what they were saying.
So what are you hearing from, let's just take the Black students, okay? So when they look at diversity and they look at what they want or their issues, what are they saying to you?
I think there was a feeling of not being heard all the time, not necessarily being asked for their input when programming was put together, kind of doing things for them but without them.
Right. It's like talking at them and not with them. Yeah.
I feel like there was not enough time for us to give them space, because when everything started going on last year, we were virtual.
Right. Well, they said that there was really actually especially for the Black and African American community, there were two pandemics happening at the same time. There was the COVID pandemic, and then there was the racism and systemic institutionalized racism happening at the same time. So yes, in part, some of the reaction to some events, people were not able to be together. But let's look at, now that that you've announced you are going to have on campus classes in the fall, and so are you? What does that mean? How are you going to address what they were saying?
Well, they're here now. Our students have been here this past year, so they've been on campus. I have a student with me today who's a leader on campus. They've been there, and we have really done more student-led programming and listened to our students when it comes to what they want, what they need, where the gaps are.
And what are you hearing?
We're hearing that the students are more appreciative of being involved, and we're learning that our students are really good leaders. They're not students, they're growing up, they're using their critical thinking skills, they're using their thoughts and their platforms to be a voice, and it's positively affecting things on our campus. That's probably the most transparent I could be, is they are shifting a culture.
So when you say that
but everything's not done in
no,
way,
well,
right?
no, that's why, well, otherwise you'd be out of a job.
Right, I would.
Yes, ultimately, I always joke that like nonprofits, you're actually an office that we don't want to have.
Yes.
Like this should just become innate, but it's in reality,
right.
It's like when they had elementary school kids wear uniforms so that they could level the playing field of who had what. Then they just start comparing each other about their hair bows or their shoelaces.
Exactly.
There's always going to be.
There is.
So your work's never going to be done.
Right.
But then there's the issue also of the idea that Indiana Tech is very much a pre-professional campus.
Yes.
So I think when you were talking before about that, we really in society we did this disservice that everybody needs to go to a certain type of 4-year college, and that some students really don't even need to. Don't go to college. They could go to a vocational program, and then you have a program I think like Indiana Tech, which is a hybrid because it's the pre-professional, but you still get a degree.
Right.
But I have my own personal soapbox issue about the decline of the liberal arts education. So when the university sort of put out their new statement on the diversity and that the president put out last summer, I think, and then he talked about this idea of getting them to have critical reasoning and being able to debate and being able to think critically. And to me, those are the things you learn by taking those liberal arts classes. And so to me, I think partly why this dynamo has been, like the fuse has been lit and we're really, and because, like you said, it's so emotional, is because we're not teaching them how to take the emotion out and think, to reason, to present an argument. That's why people are yelling at each other. And so I think that I can't prove this.
It's okay.
I think with the decline of the emphasis on liberal arts and the sake of going to college to become a well-educated, knowledgeable citizen, not to necessarily get a job or to say, okay, I pay so much for school, so therefore, how much am I going to make? I think we've lost that. And I think that is a critical reason of why these things are, because nobody knows how to debate, nobody knows how to talk to each other, and then we just get so polarized, and then then everybody's just yelling at everybody. So I'm just curious.
my thought, right?
Yeah.
You shared yours.
Yeah.
So my thoughts is, as a person who has a liberal arts education, as well as many of the leaders at Indiana Tech, I don't necessarily believe it's lost. Now, we may be dusting it off a little bit right now, but that's a prime area for our co-curricular side of the house. So it may not be in a course. Like I was a sociology corrections major. So, you take the liberal arts, the psychologies, and the sociologies. But I do think that there are some of those courses, because we have psychology courses, we have some humanities courses, but there's also an opportunity for the programming on the co-curricular side to work with our criminal justice department and our English departments and our communications. So I'm not going to say we're necessarily lacking that.
Right.
We may need to be more visible with things, but I'm not going to say our students are lacking that side of it. It's just not happening as it would on a traditional liberal arts college in the classroom. It's happening as part of the co-curricular infusion into the campus experience.
But again, I'm taking you above, I'm putting you back on our national stage with our philosophical conversation here. There's no doubt that, and even 2 universities within Fort Wayne have cut and diminished their liberal arts courses. And how can you have a university that does not have a history department? I mean, to me, partly of understanding how we got to where we are, we have to understand history. So I'm just curious, I'm not saying, Indiana Tech, how they're thinking about it, but I'm just curious if you agree some part in your role on a national about seeing this diminished, and that people, like, where you learn to understand or be emotionally aware and to be able to walk in other people's shoes is really by reading literature and then really discussing, well, what was the intent and what did they go through. And so when we take out those courses because they're not going to get you a job, or they don't give you I think they give you those soft skills that are immeasurable, the value of that. So I'm just curious, again, this is more philosophical from your expertise.
I do think, though, that we have to have an array of offerings in higher education, right? It's not a one size fits all. Some students, non-traditional students, students are coming back or even entering because they do need to complete a degree. So we have to have diversity in the education field because everything is not going to be applicable to every learner, right? So I think it's good, even being liberal art educated, I do feel as if there's positives in every type of, school out there. So with me, I'm not necessarily going to say that all schools are created equally.
No.
I think that all schools, if you can map what you're doing to your mission and what you say you're going to do, then that's success. Then you're doing what you said you were going to do, and you're educating the type of learner that you said you were going for, right? And not all schools do that with a liberal arts mindset. Not all schools are, a research one. There are schools that are definitely on a path, just like there's trade schools. You go get an HVAC degree. You go get a beauty, cosmetology degree. So it's all catered to the type of learner. And as long as there are various learners out there, there's going to be various institutions with various modes of instruction.
But we could still come up with some of the core needs. But I think that also what I think you really made me think about is that, and I hope people will think about, is that when you think about diversity, it's not just race and sex. It's all these things.
It is. It's learning styles.
And no wonder as we started this interview, no wonder your title is very big, because you've got a big job, and you've got and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
So, but I think that we really started to unpack a very difficult and heavy conversation. So I would like to end on a little bit of a lighter note, which is that, and I think this says a lot about you and what you do. And like you said, when I said about the difficulties and you said the opportunity, you put that positive spin on it, is that you are actually a lover of the Hallmark Channel and Hallmark movies, because you love love.
I do.
And so that's really coming from a very positive of looking at, the good in humanity and people coming together. And so I'm just curious.
You did your research, though. I'm going to give that to you.
I'm just curious, though, what is it about Hallmark movies that like does that sort of is that like the refuel you get so you can go out and fight the tough battle another day? Or
it could be like it literally. I'm not even gonna say I've had so many people tell me that the themes are all the same, and it's like, but you know what, you know they're gonna end, you know how it's gonna end, it's gonna end in a positive note, but it's the feel good, it's the belief that,
well, it's hope.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is the,
so it's
right.
sort of like the universal truths of these good feelings and the best part of life and the best part of humanity.
Right.
And so then I think maybe I sort of feel like, well, watching these movies and stuff sort of for you re-energizes you because you have a tough job to do. And like when I start looking at these statistics and I'm looking at, the growth of anti-Semitism and, Asian and now anti-Muslim and the irony is that this is so prevalent and the growth of what's happening on college campuses. And these are our future leaders. So I was just curious, but I thought that maybe that was your own personal...
It is. Because, I mean, I'm not going to lie. When you do this work, it's almost outside of yourself, but you do it because it's such a strong part of who you are, if that makes sense. So I do it because this is my passion. I believe it's my purpose. But there are conversations that happen where I have to hold every emotion that I want in.
Right.
Because as a woman, if I get emotional, it gets dismissed. Well,
and also because as a woman, but then also if you get angry as a black woman,
person,
then you could be an angry black woman.
Yes.
And then,
so there's all kind of biases, stereotypes,
right.
and everything. So I have to sit there in this place and with everything going on inside and really be an advocate and a voice for so many.
Right.
Till at home, I can cry over a Hallmark movie because I'm just so happy that they're in love.
But you may be really...
But it may be releasing.
Because you really are, I mean, you're doing a tremendous amount of mental work. And you're having these, I mean, it's not like, I might have a tough conversation with somebody once a week, maybe, you're having like 5 of these a day. And then you also have to deal with, getting people on board. And so I think it's, as much, I think it really says a lot about you, but I think it really helps us to see the positivity in your work. Yes. So I would say go watch some more Hallmark movies.
I do every weekend. I get one in.
But at the end of every And Good Company show, I like to ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. So in addition to our getting to know about you from your love and why, appreciation for Hallmark and the positivity of people, these are going to tell us a little bit more about your true nature.
Okay.
So what is your favorite word?
Reciprocity.
What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
What turned you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Scriptures.
What turned you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Profanity.
What sound or noise do you love?
Nothing.
So just quiet?
Just quiet.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Bass.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Writer.
Okay. What profession would you not like to do?
Data analysis.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My daughters.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
My father.
Is he no longer?
He's no longer here.
How would you like to die?
In my sleep.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well done.
So I hope that you will come back so we can continue to learn as you learn about the programs and implement training, and as you begin to really give us some lessons of because we don't have the privy to go through your training, but to give us some insight. So I hope you'll come back to continue for us to learn.
Definitely.
Great. And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.